Princess Lyra of the Empire stood at the window of her personal transport ship, watching the stars pass by in streaks of light. She was the third child of Emperor, powerful and feared across the entire galaxy. Her family's name made planets tremble. Kings and queens bowed to her father without question. But today, as her ship moved through space toward a peace conference, Lyra felt the weight of that power pressing down on her shoulders. She did not know that her brother had already planned her death. The transport carried only her most trusted guards and crew. Lyra had wanted to travel alone, to prove that the Empire had nothing to fear from the universe. Her father had disagreed but allowed it. He did not know that his second son had spent months planting a bomb in the ship's navigation system, waiting for this moment. Lyra was studying a report about human military strength when the first alarm sounded. The guards immediately moved into position, their weapons drawn. The captain of her guard, a tall named, stepped toward her. "Your Highness, we have a problem with the navigation corps," he said, his voice calm but tense. "The ship is veering off course." Before Lyra could respond, the second explosion ripped through the engine compartment. The ship lurched violently to the side. Alarms screamed through every corridor. Lyra was thrown hard against the wall, the wind knocked from her lungs. She felt something hot tear through her side, pain unlike anything she had ever experienced. Was beside her, his face twisted with rage and horror. "The ship is sabotaged, Your Highness. This was planned." More explosions followed. The crew was shouting, running, trying to reach emergency systems. Lyra could see through the window as the ship began to fall toward a gray moon below, the gravity pulling them down like a hand dragging them into an ocean. "Get to the escape pods," she gasped, her hand pressed against the wound in her side. Blood soaked through her fingers. "Not without you," said, and he lifted her, carrying her toward the back of the ship. The other guards followed, fighting through the chaos and fire. They made it to the escape pod bay, but the sabotage had reached there too. Only one pod remained intact, and it was damaged. Helped Lyra inside, strapping her into the seat with shaking hands. "You have to go," Lyra said, trying to push him back. "Save yourself." Met her eyes. "Your brother did this. My duty is to you, not to myself." He sealed the pod and hit the launch button. As the pod shot away from the dying ship, Lyra saw and the other guards through the small window. The transport exploded in a burst of orange flame and they were gone. All of them gone. The escape pod fell toward the moon like a stone thrown into dark water. Lyra tried to use the communication system, but static was all she heard. She tried to access the navigation computer, but all the codes had been locked. Someone had made sure she could not call for help. The pod crashed hard against the rocky surface of the moon. The impact threw Lyra forward, and pain exploded through her entire body. For a moment, she lost consciousness. When she woke, the pod was silent except for the hiss of damaged systems and alarms that had run out of power. She pushed the hatch open and climbed out into a dead landscape. Gray rocks stretched in all directions. Two suns hung in the purple sky, casting strange shadows. There was no sign of life, no sign of civilization, no sign that anyone would ever find her here. Lyra looked down at her wound. The initial pain had become a deep, constant ache. Her physiology was different from human biology. She could go longer without food or water, but an injury like this could kill her quickly if infection set in. Her advanced medical supplies were on the ship, now scattered across space as debris. She had training in survival. All members of the royal family received such training. But training assumed resources, assumed some chance of rescue, assumed that she was not truly alone on a moon that nobody cared about. She needed shelter. Night was coming. The temperatures on this moon could drop to killing levels. She began to walk, moving across the rocky terrain, searching for any kind of protection from the coming darkness. It took her 2 hours to find the cave. It was small, barely big enough for her to lie down in, but it was shelter. She pulled herself inside and lay on the cold stone floor, her hand pressed against her wound. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. Her vision was starting to blur from blood loss and pain. Lyra thought about her brother. He had always been jealous of her position as the favorite, the child most likely to become emperor one day. She had never thought him dangerous enough to actually try to kill her. She had underestimated him. The Empire had taught her many things, but it had not taught her how to survive alone on a dead moon with no rescue coming. As darkness fell and the temperature dropped, Lyra shivered on the cold stone. She tried to stay awake, tried to keep pressure on her wound, tried to ignore the voice in her head telling her that no one was coming, that she was going to die here, that had succeeded in removing her from the line of succession. She was so focused on her own thoughts and pain that she almost did not hear the footsteps. The sound was different from any noise she had encountered in her life. Not the heavy tread of a guard, not the clicking movement of These footsteps were lighter, faster, carried the unmistakable rhythm of a human. Lyra's hand moved to the small weapon at her hip, but she was too weak to draw it. She could only watch as a figure in a dark tactical suit emerged from the shadows, a human face visible beneath the helmet, eyes widening in shock at what he saw. The human soldier named had been on a routine reconnaissance mission on the moon when his sensors picked up the crash. He had not expected to find a living being. He certainly had not expected to find a princess, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, bleeding and dying in a cave. He saw her hand move toward a weapon, saw the fear in her eyes, and he made a choice that would change everything. "Do not be afraid," said his voice calm and steady. "I am going to help you." And Lyra, princess of the Empire, abandoned by her own family, facing death on a desolate moon, accepted help from the very people her empire had always been taught to fear, moved with quiet efficiency, his training taking over despite the shock of what he was seeing. A princess on this forgotten moon, one of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy, and she was bleeding out in a cave. He pushed those thoughts aside and focused on what mattered right now. She was hurt. She needed help. Everything else could wait. He approached slowly, keeping his hands visible and away from his weapons. The princess had a weapon at her hip, but she was too weak to use it. Still, had been trained to treat every being as a potential threat until proven otherwise. Old habits died hard, even when facing an injured alien royalty. "My name is," he said, speaking clearly and slowly. "I am a soldier with the human military. I am not going to hurt you." Lyra watched him come closer. Her eyes had trouble focusing. The pain and blood loss were making everything seem distant and strange. This human was moving fast, his suit already opening, his hands removing something from the pack at his side. She wanted to tell him to leave, that he was making a mistake helping her, but her voice would not work properly. Knelt beside her, careful not to crowd her space. He could see the wound clearly now. It was bad. Blood had soaked through her clothing and was pooling beneath her on the stone. If he did not stop the bleeding soon, she would be dead within the hour. "I need to look at your wound," said. "I need to touch you. Is that okay?" Lyra nodded. She did not have the strength to refuse or to resist. Cut away the damaged fabric of her clothing with a small medical knife. The wound was deep, clearly caused by shrapnel from an explosion. Her biology was different from human anatomy, but the basic principle was the same. If you did not stop the bleeding, you died. He opened his medical kit, the one every human soldier carried for emergencies. It contained basic supplies, nothing advanced, nothing that could handle injuries as serious as this, but had learned from his time in the military that basic supplies used with intelligence and care could do a lot of good. He cleaned the wound with antiseptic solution. Lyra gasped in pain but did not cry out, appreciated that. It meant she was thinking clearly enough to know that screaming would not help her situation. "This is going to hurt," said, "but it needs to be done." He applied the medical sealant, a substance designed to stop bleeding and prevent infection. It was not perfect for physiology, but it was better than nothing. Lyra's whole body went rigid as he worked, every muscle tight with pain, but she remained still and silent. When he finished wrapping the wound with clean bandages, sat back and looked at her face. She was conscious but barely. Her eyes were starting to close. "Stay awake," said. "I need you to stay awake. Can you tell me your name?" "Lyra," she whispered, "Princess Lyra." "I know who you are," said. "I have studied your empire in military briefings, but right now I do not care that you are a princess. Right now you are someone who needs help, and that is all that matters to me." He worked quickly, using his equipment to create a shelter. The cave was small, but he could make it work. He used reflective emergency blankets to create a barrier against the cold air coming from outside. He arranged his temperature regulation pack to provide heat. It would not be comfortable, but it would keep her alive through the night. As he worked, Lyra tried to speak. Her voice was very quiet. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You could report me to your government. I am a member of the royal family. To humans, I am a prize. I am valuable." Stopped what he was doing and looked at her directly. His face was calm and serious. "Because you are hurt," he said simply. "That is reason enough." The answer seemed to confuse Lyra. In her world, everything had a price. Every action was calculated for advantage. The idea that someone would help without expecting reward or benefit was foreign to her. It was like asking her to understand a language that did not exist in her entire culture. "The Empire will not reward you for this," she said. "My brother, he did this to me. If you help me, he will know. You will make enemies among the people." "Then I will make enemies," said. "That will not stop me from doing what is right." He finished setting up the shelter and sat down beside her, his back against the cave wall. His weapon remained at his side, but his posture was relaxed, non-threatening. In the darkness, lit only by the small glow of his emergency light, they sat in silence for a while. "You should rest," said. "Your body needs sleep to heal. I will watch over you." "You will not try to use me?" Lyra asked. "You will not contact your government?" "No," said. "I will not use you and I will not betray you. I give you my word." In her world, the word of a soldier was worth something, but it could always be broken if advantage demanded it. Lyra had been taught to trust no one completely, but as she looked at this human, as she thought about the simple kindness of his actions, she made a decision that her training told her was foolish. She decided to believe him. As the night grew colder, sat watch while Lyra slept. She was fevered, her breathing uneven, her wound still concerning despite his best efforts. He had no advanced technology, no medical equipment designed for physiology. He had only basic supplies and training that had never been intended for treating alien royalty. But he had something else, something that his military training had emphasized above all else. He had commitment. He had made a choice to help her, and he would see that choice through to the end, no matter what came next. Around midnight, Lyra's fever spiked. She began to shake, her body struggling to fight the infection trying to take hold in her wound. Moved quickly, using the cool water from his supply to wash her face and neck, trying to bring her temperature down. He removed the top layer of emergency blankets to let her cool off slightly. He talked to her through the fever, his voice calm and steady, telling her about Earth, about his family, about why he had joined the military. She could not understand most of it in her fever state, but the sound of his voice seemed to calm her. By dawn, her fever had broken. She was still weak, still in pain, but she was stable. She would live if infection did not return, if she continued to receive care. Looked out at the gray landscape as the twin suns began to rise. He knew that his actions had consequences. Helping a princess would raise questions with his government. But as he turned back to look at Lyra sleeping, her breathing steady and peaceful, he knew he had made the right choice. She was hurt. He had helped her. In the end, that was all that mattered. By the third day, Lyra's condition had improved enough that she could sit up and move around the small cave shelter. The infection had not worsened, and the pain in her side had become a dull ache instead of the sharp, burning agony it had been before. She was still weak, still moving carefully, but she was no longer fighting just to stay alive. Had spent those 3 days keeping watch, checking her wound regularly, providing water and the small amount of food he carried in his survival pack. He had not slept much, refusing to rest while she remained in danger. His commitment to her safety had never wavered, not even for a moment. On the morning of the third day, as the gray light of the twin suns filtered into the cave, Lyra asked him about his life. She was trying to understand this human who had risked so much for her. It was the only way she could make sense of his actions. "Tell me about your family," she said, her voice stronger than before. Smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him since he found her. "I have a mother and a sister," he said. "They live on Earth in a city called Seattle. It is near the ocean. My mother wanted me to become a teacher, but I chose military service instead. She was not happy with that choice, but she accepts it now." "She must be worried about you," Lyra said. "All the time you spend away from home." "Yes," agreed, "but she knows why I do it. I do it to protect people. I do it to help those who cannot help themselves." Lyra thought about this. In her world, soldiers served the Empire and their emperor. They served for glory, for advancement, for wealth. The idea that a soldier would serve to protect others, simply to protect others, was a concept her mind had to work to grasp. "You risked everything by helping me," Lyra said. "Your government could punish you. They could remove you from your position. The Empire could declare war on your people because of what you have done." "Yes," said, "all of those things are possible." "Then why did you do it?" Lyra pressed. "What benefit do you receive?" Was quiet for a long moment. He looked out at the gray landscape beyond the cave entrance, watching the wind kick up dust on the rocky surface. "There is no benefit to me," he said finally. "Not in the way you mean. I did not do it for advantage. I did it because it was right. In my culture, in my military training, we have something called the moral code. It says that we protect those who are vulnerable. We do not abandon the injured. We do not turn away from those who need help." "But what if following that code costs you everything?" Lyra asked. She understood power and politics in a way that few beings in the galaxy could. She knew the cost of principle in a world where ruthlessness won the day. "Then I will have lost everything and still know that I did the right thing," said. "And I will be able to live with myself, knowing that I chose principle over survival." Lyra's mind struggled with this. In her world, the philosophy that described was not just wrong. It was insane. It was the kind of thinking that got you killed, that got your family killed, that destroyed empires. And yet it had saved her life. On the fourth day, Lyra was strong enough to help gather firewood from the dried plants scattered across the landscape near the cave. They worked together, moving slowly so as not to stress her healing wound. As they worked, Lyra began to explain what had happened to her ship. "My brother sabotaged the navigation system," she said. "He wanted me dead so that he could move closer to the throne. Our father is old now. It was only a matter of time before one of us would be chosen as his successor, was ambitious. He was not willing to wait." "So this was not an accident," said. "No," Lyra said. "This was murder. My entire guard died when the ship exploded. Who had served my family for 20 years died because he refused to leave me. And now I am trapped on this moon and my brother controls the narrative. He will tell the Empire that I died in an accident. No one will ever know the truth." Looked at her, and something in his expression hardened. It was the first time Lyra had seen anger in him. "Then we will tell them the truth," he said. "We will find a way to contact your people, and we will tell them exactly what happened." "They will not believe a human soldier over the word of the crown prince," Lyra said. "Has power and position. All I have is my word, and I am supposed to be dead." "Then we will find proof," said. The escape pod has a black box recording system. If the pod survived the crash, it should have data from the ship. That data will show the sabotage. Over the next 2 days, and Lyra worked together to reach the escape pod. It had crashed several kilometers from their cave, in a rocky valley. The walk took them most of a day, with Lyra moving carefully and always watching to make sure she did not overexert herself. When they reached the pod, used his equipment to access the black box. The data was corrupted in places, damaged by the crash and the extremes of the moon environment, but enough remained. The recordings showed the navigation system being tampered with before launch. The recordings showed the sabotage code being activated in flight. The recordings showed the deliberate destruction of the escape pod controls to prevent rescue calls. It was all there, proof of guilt preserved in the digital systems of the escape pod. Now what? Lyra asked, watching secure the data onto his own communication device. Now we wait for rescue, said. I sent a request for extraction 4 days ago, but I made it sound routine. Now I am going to send another message, one that makes it clear that we have something the government will want very badly. He composed a message carefully, explaining that he had recovered the survivor of the Imperial transport crash, along with black box evidence of sabotage. He did not provide details, but he made it clear that the information was valuable and secure. Within hours, they received a response. The Empire wanted their princess alive and the evidence secured. They were sending a ship to retrieve them both. That night, as they sat in the cave one last time before rescue came, Lyra looked at with something new in her eyes. It was gratitude, yes, but it was also something more. It was respect, and perhaps even the beginnings of friendship. You have changed everything, she said. Not just for me, but for my empire. Will be tried and convicted. The truth will be known, and it happened because you chose to help a stranger instead of thinking about yourself. I just did what I thought was right, said. Yes, Lyra said, and that is why it will matter so much. In the morning, the human rescue shuttle descended through the atmosphere of the small moon, and 2 beings, one human and one, prepared to face a future that neither of them could have predicted. The human rescue shuttle descended slowly through the thin atmosphere of the moon, its engines kicking up clouds of gray dust as it approached the landing zone. Lyra watched it come down, a small part of her feeling relief that rescue had arrived, while a larger part worried about what would happen next. The Galactic Council would have many questions. The Empire would have demands, and would be caught in the middle of political forces that were far beyond his understanding. Captain Helen was the first person to emerge from the shuttle, followed by a medical team and security personnel. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Her eyes went wide when she saw Lyra standing beside in the cave entrance. Sergeant, what in the name of, Helen began, then stopped herself. She was a military officer with years of experience, and she understood that this moment needed careful handling. Captain said, his voice steady and professional. This is a civilian casualty recovered from the crashed Imperial transport. She requires medical attention. I have also recovered evidence related to the crash. Helen looked from to Lyra, and something flickered across her face as she processed what was happening. This was a princess, not a civilian casualty. This was a political incident that would be analyzed and debated at the highest levels of government. But Helen was also a good officer who understood her duty. Get her medical attention, she ordered her team. Carefully, we need her alive and in good condition. The medical team moved forward with a portable medical station. They scanned Lyra's wound with equipment far more advanced than what had been able to provide. One of the doctors, a woman named, looked at with something close to amazement. These bandages, said. You did this with basic field supplies. Yes, ma'am, said. You kept her alive, said. With these injuries and these conditions, she should be dead, but you kept her alive. Lyra was transferred to a medical pod that regulated temperature, pressure, and provided advanced treatment for her wound. As the pod worked, it pulled data from her communication device and linked it with the information had extracted from the escape pod. The full picture of what had happened to her came together clearly. Helen watched the data stream, her military training helping her understand the gravity of what they had recovered. Sabotage, murder of the heir to the throne, an attempted cover-up that would have blamed the death on accident rather than betrayal. "Sergeant," Helen said, calling aside, "I need you to understand what you have done here. The political implications of this are enormous. You have potentially altered the entire power structure of the Empire." "I only helped someone who was hurt," Captain said. "Yes," Helen said, "and in doing so, you have made yourself part of the most significant political event in a decade. The government will want to thank you. Your own government will want to understand your actions. The Galactic Council will have questions." Nodded. He had understood the risks when he decided to help Lyra. He had understood then that his actions would have consequences. He had chosen to help her anyway, and he was prepared to face those consequences. The journey back to Earth's orbital station took several hours. During that time, Lyra's condition stabilized further under proper medical care. Her wound was treated with medical technology, brought up from the planet below and adapted for the human medical systems. By the time they docked, she was conscious and coherent, able to speak and think clearly. The first thing she did was ask for. He was brought to her medical pod by Captain, who waited outside with security personnel. Lyra looked at him through the transparent wall of the medical pod, and her eyes held gratitude and something else. Respect, acknowledgement of what he had done. "The evidence is clear," Lyra said, her voice strong despite her injuries. "My brother sabotaged the transport. There can be no doubt. The black box recordings show everything. He will be tried and convicted." "That is good," said. "Justice should be served." "Because of you," Lyra said. "Because a human soldier chose to help instead of choosing to benefit from my misery. That choice has changed everything for my empire." News of Lyra's rescue spread quickly through the galactic community. Within hours, the government sent an official delegation to Earth's orbital station. They arrived with gratitude and with questions. How had a human soldier come to rescue the princess? Why had he not reported her capture? Was this a human plot to gain leverage with the Empire? Was brought before a formal inquiry, with representatives from the government, the human military command, and observers from several other galactic species. The hearing was tense, filled with political calculation and the careful weighing of every word. But spoke simply and honestly about what had happened. He described finding Lyra injured and bleeding in the cave. He explained his decision to provide medical care. He detailed the steps he had taken to preserve her life and to recover the evidence of sabotage. He did not ask for reward or recognition. He simply stated the facts. When he was asked why he had risked court-martial to help an alien princess, gave an answer that none of the politicians had expected. "Because she was hurt," he said. "Because she was alone. Because helping her was the right thing to do. In my military and my culture, we have a principle that says we protect those who are vulnerable. We do not abandon the injured. We do not turn our backs on those who need help, no matter what species they are or what position they hold. That principle is more important to me than my career, more important than political advantage, more important than anything else." The hearing room went silent. It was a simple statement, but it carried a weight that political speeches could never match. It spoke to something fundamental in human nature, something that transcended politics and power. When the hearing ended, the ambassador approached personally. "You have given my empire a gift greater than wealth or weapons," she said. "You have shown us what true honor looks like. We will not forget this." She presented him with the Medal of Valor, the highest award given to those who showed courage and selflessness. It was the first time in history that a human had received such recognition from the Empire. But more important, too, was what came next. Captain Helen called him into her office after the hearing. "The military is promoting you to lieutenant," she said. "Full promotion with all the benefits and pay increase that comes with it. You have brought honor to the human military and to Earth itself. We are proud of you, Sergeant. Or should I say, Lieutenant?" Was shocked. He had expected punishment or, at minimum, an investigation that could have ended his career. Instead, he was being promoted and honored. "Thank you, Captain," he said simply. "Do not thank me," Helen said. "Thank yourself for doing what was right. In a galaxy full of people making choices based on politics and power and advantage, you made a choice based on principle. That is rare, that is precious, and that is why we honor it." As left the captain's office, he thought about Lyra, recovering in the medical pod. He thought about her brother, facing justice for his crimes. He thought about how one choice, one decision to help instead of exploit, had created ripples that spread across the entire galactic community. He had not known that helping an injured alien princess would change his life, but it had, and he would spend the rest of his career understanding the true depth of what that choice had meant, not just for him, but for the future of human relations and the broader galactic community itself. 6 months had passed since the rescue on the moon. The Empire had massive changes in that time, had been tried for attempted murder, sabotage, and treason against the crown. The evidence from the escape pod black box was irrefutable. He had been found guilty and imprisoned, stripped of his titles and his place in the line of succession. Emperor, Lyra's father, had been forced to acknowledge the bitter truth about his second son. Lyra had returned to her people as something more than a princess. She had returned as a symbol of justice, of truth, and of redemption. Her time on the moon, her rescue by a human soldier, her recovery of evidence against her own brother had tested her in ways that growing up in the imperial palace never could have. She had learned that honor was not about power or position. It was about choosing what was right even when it cost you everything. She had also learned about a species that the Empire had always viewed with suspicion and caution. The humans were different from what the Empire had taught her. They were not savage or mindless. They were principled and loyal and willing to risk their lives for those they barely knew. Lieutenant had been reassigned. He was no longer conducting simple reconnaissance missions on forgotten moons. He had been selected for something new, something that was being built specifically because of what had happened between him and Lyra. The humans and they were establishing a new diplomatic station, a place where the two species could meet, talk, and begin the process of understanding each other. Stood in the observation deck of the new station, watching the stars beyond the transparent aluminum walls. The station was called the Unity, and it represented the first real cooperation between the human military and the Empire. He wore his new uniform, the black and gold insignia of a diplomatic security officer proudly displayed on his shoulder. The door to the observation deck opened and Lyra entered. She was fully healed now, her strength returned, her wound nothing more than a thin scar on her side. She wore the formal dress of her station, the elaborate robes of a princess, but there was something different about how she carried herself. She moved with the confidence of someone who had been tested and found their own strength. "I thought I would find you here," Lyra said. Turned and a smile crossed his face. "Your Highness," he said, inclined his head in respect. "We have been through too much together for such formality," Lyra said. "You saved my life. We can be friends, I think." Smile widened. "I would like that very much." They stood together at the window, watching the vast expanse of space. The station orbited Earth, and far below, millions of humans went about their lives, unaware of the diplomatic changes happening above them. On the other side of known space, millions went about their lives, still processing the new reality of open cooperation with humans. "I have been thinking about what you told me that first night in the cave," Lyra said. "You said that in your culture, you have a principle that says you protect those who are vulnerable. I told the council about this principle. I explained it to my father. What did he say? Asked. He said it was impractical. He said that such principles would make us weak in a galaxy full of predators and competitors, Lyra said. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was firm. But then he saw the evidence of betrayal. He understood what had done and why he had done it. He realized that the ruthlessness he had taught his children, the willingness to see power as the only thing that mattered, had created a son willing to murder his own sister for advancement. Listened carefully. He understood the weight of what Lyra was saying. My father has ordered a change in the way the military is trained, Lyra continued. They will still be warriors. They will still be fierce and strong. But they will also be taught about honor, about protecting those who are vulnerable, about choosing what is right over what is advantageous. Because my father understands now that a civilization built on ruthlessness alone will eventually collapse from within. A civilization built on principle, on honor, on loyalty to something greater than personal ambition, that kind of civilization can endure. Felt something shift in his chest. He had not expected his actions to have such broad impact. He had simply done what he thought was right. The consequences had spread far beyond anything he could have predicted. You changed us, Lyra said, looking directly at him. You and your people, not through weapons or conquest, but through something far more powerful. You changed us through an example of principle in action. That is why the council agreed to this station, to this partnership. Because we saw in you something we had lost in ourselves. We saw what it looks like to choose right over advantage. Over the following weeks, the station began to fill with military and diplomatic personnel from both species. Classes were held to teach humans about culture and about human values. Training exercises brought soldiers from both species together to learn how to work as a team. Slowly, carefully, relationships formed that went beyond simple political necessity. Was assigned to work with Lyra as a liaison officer. His role was to help her understand human military culture and to help her communicate human perspective to the council. It was demanding work, but it was also deeply rewarding. One evening, as they reviewed military protocols in Lyra's office on the station, she asked him a question that caught him off guard. Do you ever regret it, helping me instead of using me for advantage? Thought about this carefully. No, he said finally. Not for a moment. It was the best choice I have ever made. Not because it led to promotion or recognition or any of those things, but because it was the right choice. Because I was able to look at myself in the mirror and know that I had done what I thought was right, regardless of the consequences. Lyra nodded, as if this confirmed something she had been thinking about. That is the difference, she said. In the Empire, a choice is only good if it leads to benefit, but in your culture, a choice is good if it is based on principle. That is a revolutionary concept to my people. As the months passed, the station became a success. Humans began to understand that they could work together, that their differences did not make them enemies. They learned that cooperation could accomplish more than competition ever could. The Galactic Council watched this development with interest. Some species were threatened by the new human alliance. Others saw it as a positive step toward greater stability in the galaxy. The ripple effects of choice to help an injured princess had spread outward, changing the political landscape in ways that would affect billions of beings across multiple star systems. On the first anniversary of his rescue of Lyra, a ceremony was held on the station. Representatives from both the human government and the Empire attended. Was honored again, not with medals or titles, but with something more meaningful. Both the human military and the Empire declared him an ambassador of friendship between their peoples. During the ceremony, Lyra stood beside him, and she spoke to the gathered crowd about what had happened on that moon and what it had meant. One human soldier made a choice, she said. He chose to help instead of exploit. He chose principle over advantage. That single choice has changed the trajectory of my entire empire. It has shown us what we had forgotten about ourselves. It has opened a door to a future that we could never have imagined before." She turned too, and in her eyes was genuine friendship and deep respect. "Lieutenant, you have taught us more than any diplomat or commander ever could. You have taught us that the greatest strength is not in weapons or power, but in the willingness to do what is right, even when it costs you everything." Later, after the ceremony had ended and most of the delegates had departed, and Lyra stood together again in the observation deck. They had made this their place, the spot where they could think and talk without the pressure of politics or protocol. "What do you think will happen now?" Lyra asked. Looked out at the stars, thinking about how far they had come in just 1 year. "I think," he said slowly, "that we are at the beginning of something that no one fully understands yet, something that will take time to grow and develop, but I think it will be something good. I think that what we are building here, this station, this alliance, this friendship between our peoples, it will matter. It will make a difference." Lyra smiled. "Because you chose to help." "Because I chose to help," agreed. And together, they watched the stars, knowing that they had set in motion changes that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. A single choice, a moment of kindness, a decision to do what was right regardless of the consequences. That was all it had taken to change everything. In the vast darkness of space, lit by billions of distant stars, two beings from different worlds stood side by side, proof that principle, honor, and the courage to do what is right could bridge any divide, overcome any prejudice, and build a future greater than any of them could have imagined alone.